Pentax announced the K-1 Mark II, their 36 megapixel full frame top end camera, I guess other than their medium format camera. And it is a weird camera release. It's real weird. So in 2016, Pentax announced the original K-1, and this is the exactly the same camera with a couple of little changes. So you can pre-order it at sdp.io/K1I, and it'll cover up those changes. Now, first, if you're an existing K-1 owner and you're like, oh man, now my camera's obsolete, don't sweat it, because Pentax is doing something I've never seen done before. You can send your existing K-1 to them, and they will open it up and swap out the circuit board and upgrade it to a K-1 Mark II. Because all of the changes between these two cameras are contained within this updated circuit board. That is a little weird. It's a quirk, but it is very cool. This offer will exist only from May 21st to September 30th. It's $550 in the US, but it's available in other parts of the world too. You might just prefer to sell your camera used and buy a new K-1 Mark II. It seems like the price difference will be about the same. The one difference that they made with the K-1 Mark II is higher ISOs, but as we mentioned, they did not change the sensor. It seems to be the same sensor. The top end ISO rate limit is now 819,000, whereas on the K-1 original one, it was 209,000, but it's the same sensor. And I see camera manufacturers do this all the time. They give it some astronomical upper ISO limit, and that's fine. But if you infer from that it is 2 stops better, you are incorrect. We've seen this time and time again and tested it time and time again. ISO, especially ISO limits, is an entirely arbitrary restriction. They could make it 10 zillion and it still would mean nothing more, because you will just get more and more noise as you increase it. You could shoot raw and just underexpose a shot by 2 stops and then crank it up in post, and you'd probably get the same results. Nonetheless, Pentax is saying that the image quality at very high ISOs is improved, and sometimes that will happen by just tweaking the algorithms a little bit, because these high ISOs can look really bad, but if you just read things a little bit differently. Nonetheless, I never really use these high ISOs, so I wouldn't ever appreciate this, and I don't think most users do. They also said that they improved the AF tracking algorithm, and the original K-1 had very primitive autofocus. Like, it was on par with kind of like almost an entry-level camera or an older camera like the original Canon 5D. We found it was insufficient to do even the most basic of autofocus tracking. Now, they did not update the autofocus system, but they updated the algorithm, so we will have to wait and test it to see how much better it actually is, if that's worth the upgrade. Seems like it's going to be a little bit better, but not going to be a lot better, so subscribe to see the full review that we'll have coming up. They're also introducing, this is the interesting part, dynamic pixel shift resolution. So the original K-1 and a lot of cameras from companies like Sony, Olympus, Panasonic has a sensor shifting mechanism that will stabilize your handshake. And it also has a mechanism for taking multiple pictures with the sensor shifted 1 pixel. And that allows you to stack the pictures so that every single pixel has full range of color information, red, green, and blue. That's great. We've tested this many times in the past. It does improve image quality, particularly in images that have lots of primary colors and lots of details when you're using a really sharp lens. We like it. But it only ever works with still subjects, and it only ever works on a tripod. So with this Pentax update, they're now allowing you to use this technology handheld. So in other words, as you're taking pictures, your hands move a little bit. The sensor will now shift to accommodate your hand movement and that additional 1 pixel that it needs to shift. This has been something everybody's been asking for, and if this works, it is a landmark. It's a real big step. No other camera manufacturer has ever done this, and it could be really good. This could take imaging to the next level by completely overcoming the limitations of the red, green, blue bare filter and giving us perfect color information at every pixel without requiring a tripod. But I'm real skeptical about it. First, with the original K-1, I'll have a link to the review in a second, we found that the pixel shift mechanism to be useless for landscape photos, because even in what looks like a still scene, there's always some amount of movement. Water might move a little bit, leaves might move a little bit. And though the Pentax is supposed to accommodate that and stitch it out, we found it failed so much that things ended up being real weird. Second, even on a tripod, between multiple shots, it's possible for a little bit of movement to happen. The earth might move. The wind might blow the tripod just a tiny bit. So we had a fairly high failure rate with these images, requiring us to take several images over and over again to get success. So I'm a little skeptical that I'll be able to handhold it and have much success when I still struggle a little bit with the consistency of even on a nice and steady tripod, especially because the compensating for handshake, the sensor can only move a certain amount. It has a limit in each of the 4 directions. And if you move too much while you're hand holding a shot, then you'll end up with a little bit of motion blur that can't be avoided. So for this mechanism to work, your hand holding would have to not exceed the maximum movement of the sensor across the period of time that it takes the camera to take 4 separate shots. And this camera takes, I think, 4.4 frames per second. So the fastest you're possibly going to get those 4 shots done is over the course of about 1 full second. That means that you cannot exceed the available movement of that sensor over the course of 1 second, and you're given no visual feedback, because while the camera is taking a picture, the viewfinder is blacked out, and therefore, even if you were looking through the viewfinder and trying to keep it completely still, you're going to find that really difficult. I don't see any way for this to work unless they were to take the pictures in very rapid succession, like within a 1/10 of a second or a 20th of a second, or whatever your normal hand-holding limit would be. And on something like a 24-70, maybe I could take handheld pictures at a 1/4 of a second with these sensor stabilization technologies, but consistently taking images at 1 full second, that seems like a real stretch. So we'll test it and see. But I would not place pre-orders for this camera because you're excited about this technology. I would definitely wait for it to be released and tested in the real world before you plunk your money down, especially because this is the only what I consider to be tangible improvement between the K-1 and the K-1 Mark II. Now, I looked at the Pentax forums, and a lot of people are upset by this, and that's always a little ridiculous because this is something that didn't exist before. It is something new and exciting, and you can still go buy the old camera if you want it. It's only like $1,500. It's a fantastic value. But nonetheless, we know camera companies aren't going to release another new camera immediately afterwards, and the K-1 replacement was really anticipated because we want another great contender in the full-frame camera marketplace. And this isn't it. This is not the A7R Mark III killer. This is not the D850 killer, or even the 5D Mark IV killer. It's something different. They really still are very limited in their lenses that Pentax considers to be designed for digital. Now, I know there's a big library of older lenses, but Pentax themselves only recommends using these limited selection of design for digital lenses. And since 2016, when the original K-1 was released, we really haven't seen many new options. You're still pretty much going to be using the Tamron 24-70 and 15-30 rebranded Pentax lenses. And those are good. As long as those are exactly the lenses you need, you're okay. But I kept hoping we'd see more lenses from them. And we really struggled with the autofocus on the original K-1. The autofocus points are very small and clustered in the middle, really limiting the usefulness even for things like autofocus. You have to do a lot of focus and recompose, and that feels really primitive nowadays. And it seems to be the same autofocus, and that's kind of shocking to me. I would have thought that would be the first thing they would replace. Also, the buffer times in the original camera are a pain. Now, it's limited to 17 raw shots, and that sounds okay, especially on a camera that doesn't even shoot 5 frames per second. But nonetheless, in real-world uses, I found myself running into the buffer all the time. Why? Because I was using that pixel shifting technology that would stack 4 images, and I was doing things like buffering. And in landscape shots, often you shoot and you promptly zoom or change the composition a little bit and shoot again. And the buffer cleared really, really slowly on this camera. So I was continually, even shooting just landscapes, running up against the buffer and ending up frustrated. So that's frustrating that they didn't change that. It also has basically the same sensor from the Nikon D800E, which was released in 2012. Nikon replaced the sensor in the D850, and Sony has upgraded the sensor to the new 42 megapixel sensor. So I really hope that we'd see them use one of these sensors, but it's the same kind of old sensor. Now, it's a fantastic sensor, but it is older. There are newer, better sensors. Cameras are getting sharper. So we have all these technologies that can take multiple images and stitch them together, but at the same time, we could probably get the similar quality out of a 45 megapixel sensor. Nonetheless, at $2,000, it's a fantastic value. Oh, also the video is still 1080p 30 frames per second. Nowadays, 1080p 60 frames per second is considered a huge disappointment. Everybody's mad at Canon for not adopting 4K, so we're now like 2 generations behind on video technologies. It's simply not a camera anybody would pick up if you were a hybrid shooter at all. What is going on at Pentax? Just in the production of this video, Justin and I said, oh, we want to be able to show some video clips of the camera in use, demonstrate the new technologies. So we went to find Pentax's YouTube page, and this is it. They have 7,000 subscribers and haven't put out a video in a year. They didn't put out any video around this. The marketing is almost non-existent around this camera or any of their recent cameras. And in fact, you should search for the Pentax YouTube channel and you'll come up with a video that says, what is going on with Pentax marketing? Good question. I don't know what's happening at Pentax. Reach out to us a little bit. Give us the information because we want to support you. We want more competition, especially among these high-end camera makers. We want Pentax to succeed, but you're not giving us the resources we need to help you. If you want to see a review of the Pentax K-1, which is almost identical to the K-1 Mark II, we did it, sdp.io/K1 review. And if you want to learn how to use the camera, we have a full hour-long tutorial at sdp.io/tutorial. It should be available, according to Amazon, at April 11th, 2018 for the price of $2,000 without a lens. They're selling it as a kit with their, I think, a 28 to 135 lens. It's not the sharpest lens. I would not recommend it. If you're interested in the new features and you want to get the most out of it, you pretty much have to get the 24 to 70 f2.8, which is a Tamron manufactured lens, and it is a good lens. Thanks. That's all I have for you. Follow-up questions and comments, write it down below, and I'll try to help out when I can. And we should have the new review sometime in April. Thanks. Bye.